Hi, can we start?
Is he talking or are we not able to hear or?
Even I'm not able to hear him. Viswesh?
No, I'm not hearing anything.
Viswesh, hi. Give me 1 minute, everyone.
Yeah, he's on mute actually.
Yeah. He's not able to unmute. Could you join again? Ria, can we pause the recording and start again? Because this thing will record again and again.
Sure, sure.
So thanks everyone for attending the session. I'm glad to be here talking about ESG ratings and the entire realm of what an ESG rating is, who are the players who are out there, what the exact process is that goes into an ESG rating, how it's done, and possibly what the future could look like. Before I sort of get into the nitty-gritty of things, I sort of would like to ask, all of you here, what you think is an ESG rating. What is an ESG rating? So yeah, the floor is yours. Please feel free to give your answers.
Is it something like ratings given to bonds to tell something about the quality of the portfolio?
Yep, no, that's a good answer.
It's
yes,
based on the ESG performance. Based on the criteria, some scores will be given, and based on this, it will be like rated, and it's kind of a listing in the stock exchange later on.
Thank you. Good. Yeah, I mean, these are very good answers.
For me, I will say it's basically, assigned to a company, and it's basically a view on the focus and direction around, environment, social, and governance issues. It's a lens on whatever the rater feels is their focus and direction and capability.
Totally agree with you. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely on point. So yeah, sort of summing up the answers. Yes, I mean, all of you were correct. But let me take a step back and tell that at a higher level, it's simply a rating on anything environmental, social, and governance for a particular company, or it can be for a bond, as another participant suggested. It can be for anything. You can give an ESG rating for, let's say, a restaurant that you visit or a product that you buy on Amazon. And very similarly, how we give ratings everywhere, across all spaces, all domains, all products, all services. ESG rating is just another rating, but it focuses only on the environmental, social, and governance aspects, whether it be a company, a service, a product, a country, anything of that sorts. But at a high level, that is what is an ESG rating. But today we're predominantly going to be focusing on ESG ratings for companies or corporates. Moving on. So this is a very prominent statement made by Larry Fink. He's the CEO of the world's largest asset manager, BlackRock, which manages about 10 trillion USD under management. And this statement is strong because it sends a message to the entire investment community that, look, ESG or sustainability is important for protecting money or for protecting invested capital and generating long-term returns. So this came as a clear message, and Larry Fink continues to do so year after year in his annual letter, with increasing focus on climate change and ESG, primarily because investors in general are concerned on not losing their capital and at the same time generating returns. So ESG over the course has moved from a good to do stuff to a more practical risk mitigation oriented approach, and eventually to an approach where you can actually generate returns. And this is where exactly how the rating agencies, how did ESG ratings come into place? So to understand that question, we have to take a step back to understand what investors want. From an investor standpoint, both institutional investors, meaning large pension funds, banks, asset managers, and also the emerging retail investor community, which is us, anyone who can go invest in the public markets. So all these folks want to first objectively assess the ESG performance of a company. So they want this. At the same time, they also want to understand and identify what kind of financially material ESG risks that the company has. Financially material meaning any sort of ESG risk that can financially impact the company's returns. And lastly, investors also want to better anticipate future risks and opportunities because they are always more towards a longer term thinking and focus towards a longer term value creation approach. So they want to protect capital, but also at the same time ensure stable, consistent returns. And this is how predominantly the ESG ratings come into force. Like this is how they found a market and that needs to be addressed. And they've come up with different products and solutions to address this particular challenge. And it's a challenge that continues to evolve and continues to grow. So we are in this journey together and we'll see how it grows. So moving on from this to the next aspect, here I want to just touch upon how investors use ESG ratings. And as you can see from this slide, there are basically 6 key ways by which investors sort of integrate ESG ratings into their analysis. The first one being supplementing own ratings. So this predominantly applies for the world's largest asset managers, for example, BlackRock or Vanguard or State Street, wherein they have tremendous amounts of inflow of capital and they have themselves designed their own proprietary ESG ratings, and they only use these external rating providers to just supplement their own rating. So they just get the data from these rating providers, they get some sort of analysis, but at the end of the day, they do their own internal analysis to find companies that they would like to invest in. So this is one method. The other method is just benchmarking assessment. So these are for investors to get an idea of where their portfolio companies stand in a ratings ranking. So they would just get the benchmarking data of companies from different ESG rating agencies to see which companies tend to do better overall, but also from just certain ESG rating parameters or metrics. The third aspect is a warning mechanism. These are more for investors who want to make sure that their portfolio companies are not involved in any extreme violations. It can be any big, bribery corruption scandal, a cybersecurity breach, or an environmental pollution incident that significantly affects the company's market share. So this is the third way. The other way that they use is using customized data. So for this category of investors primarily mean thematic investors. This means that investors who only focus on one particular ESG topic. For example, let's say there's an investor who is only focused on companies contributing towards lesser climate change. So this means that investor would only look at the climate change data from these rating agencies. They would just get that information and then use it with them to customize their portfolio. The fifth aspect is company engagement. So these are more for impact investors who would like to create long-term impact. Even if a company, let's say, is not doing so well, when it comes to ESG performance. They would get this analysis from the rating agency, and then they would go directly engage with the companies that they've invested in to further understand and suggest on ways that they can improve and the company can improve as well on their ESG performance. So this is sort of for this kind of investor community. And the last element is most of the investors do follow this, which is just portfolio realignment. So investors will have the ESG ratings and they would adjust the weights of their portfolio based on the rating parameters that the company falls under. So these are sort of the different ways that investors use ESG ratings. Before going on to the next section, I'm just going to take a pause here to answer any questions you might have so far.
Hi, could you just explain that portfolio realignment once, please? Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. So let's take, for example, a mutual fund, SBI Blue Chip, mutual fund, and let's say it has an ESG focus to it, and these will be tied to an ESG rating. So let's say once an investor gets this data from a rating agency, and they've noticed that this company's ESG performance has decreased over the past year, but then in their mutual fund alignment portfolio, they would have given a very high weight to this particular company, which means they would have invested more capital in this company. So what then the investor would do is go and adjust the weights accordingly. If the company is doing better, probably they might increase the weights. If the company is not doing so well from an ESG standpoint, they would just reduce the amount of funds that go into that company and shift it to another company. So this is what we mean by portfolio realignment.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you so much. I've understood it. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Of course, no problem. Cool. So moving on to the next section where we will discuss about the biggest and the major players within the ESG rating space. So in this graph, I've sort of differentiated how they all fall into different categories. The first section, which is the market, are the big names, the big ones that are globally recognized, and most of the investors have access to their platforms. So you have the Bloomberg, FactSet, Fitch, Morningstar, Moody's, so on and so forth. The next section is where you have the ESG focused rating agencies or firms. And this is where someone like Sustainalytics or Vigeo Eiris or ISS, Refinitiv, RepRisk, all these firms do focus on some element of ESG or the entire full bracket of ESG. And then within this section, you then have a subsection called the specialist. So here they only focus on one particular issue. For example, Equally just focus on the aspect of gender equality. Truecost focus only on climate change and environment. And GRESB sort of focus only on real estate. So this here sort of sets the picture on the different kinds of ESG rating providers out there, what they do, what they focus on, and how they focus on. Sort of tied to this, I would then want to show you how the rating space has sort of evolved over the years. So currently, there are over 600 plus ESG rating firms and ranking firms existing globally. They're everywhere, they're very country specific, region specific. But at a higher level, if you see some of the biggest rating firms, they have been consolidating. And it's showed in this picture where, Morningstar was acquired by Sustainalytics, S&P sort of integrated with RobecoSAM, Moody's acquired Vigeo Eiris, and MSCI has been its own ESG investing arm by itself. And you also have the Deutsche Börse Group, which is partnering with ISS ESG. So this goes on to show that here the bigger players are interested in ESG because it's becoming an imperative from an investor standpoint. So they, of course, would like to develop in-house ESG expertise, but at the same time, they felt that it's even easier to go and acquire already existing major players out there, so then they can integrate it in a more easier way. And that's what's now happening in the market, where all the major typical credit rating firms and data provider firms are basically acquiring ESG specialists so that they can fully integrate into their financial investment and analysis. And in terms of talking about some of the biggest ESG rating firms, it's basically MSCI and Sustainalytics. The main reason why I call them big is one, their coverage. So both these rating firms cover some of the world's biggest companies, and it's about 13,000 companies across the globe. The world's biggest 13 to 15,000 companies across the globe. The level of analysis and granularity they provide, the different kinds of ratings they offer. They don't only offer just company ratings, but they also offer country risk ratings. They also offer bond ratings. They also offer ratings on certain issues like climate change or environmental aspects. So they've been in this marketplace also for over 25 to 30 years. So these are reasons why they've become some of the most biggest and the major players when it comes to ESG ratings. So this framework here is to again give you an idea of where the ESG ratings fit within the broader sustainability market. And as you would have come across through this bootcamp, that there are tons of terminologies, terms, and different sustainability frameworks that are used, and it can get confusing. And I'm still confused because there are so many new things that is coming up every other day. But this sort of just sets the picture, showing that on one section you have the standards, the global sustainability standards, like the GRI, SASB, ISB, and then on the other end you have the frameworks that are developed to help cope up with the standards. These include the TCFD, Global Compact, the SDG framework, the different frameworks that CDP has. And then sort of encompassing all these, you have the ESG raters and ranking systems. So they only follow what the standard and framework exist, so that everyone eventually is in alignment. I will again take a pause here because to ask any questions if you might have.
Yeah, I just have one question. You mentioned IFC and OECD, so they're both a standard and a framework because they are overlapping?
Yes, exactly. So they're sort of, I would say, what I might call in-betweeners. They're either here or there. They sort of try to bridge the gap between standards and frameworks. They don't in particular, for example, OECD has a certain conditions or metrics or rule books that they use that companies could follow, more like guidelines, but they don't enforce them per se. So yes, they are basically sort of the in-betweeners, if I may say.
Is it, the quick question, this is Reed, is it fair to say that most of these ratings agencies are really only focused on publicly listed equity?
Very good question. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, predominantly all these ratings only focus on public listed equity,
which is a very small proportion of the number of companies out there, right?
Indeed, yeah. I mean, if you consider the private market, they're in the millions. Currently now in my role within ERM, I'm exactly what I'm focusing on is within the private markets. But as you pointed out, it's a very small proportion. But in a way, the reason that this picked up is because in terms of also disclosures, it's easier for listed companies because in most of the regions in Europe, in the US as well, they're mandated to disclose certain level of information, not just financial information, but also sustainability related information. And it sort of evolved from there. But as you pointed out, it's still, I mean, 13, 15,000 companies among the world's biggest. They do have a significant impact, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that you should neglect all the SMEs or the really small private companies that also exist out there. And we're seeing traction in that space as well now going forward, but it's still, let's say, in its infancy compared to where these rating agencies are when it comes to public markets.
Also, companies can can volunteer to be rated, isn't it? Like in case companies want to be rated by these rating agencies,
Yes.
that's possible.
Yes. So that is possible. There are two ways to it, right? So one, let's say an investor comes to the rating agency and says, look, I want to rate this company. So here the company does not have a particular say. It's the rating agency is going to eventually rate the company. And why they're doing this is because either the investor has a significant amount of capital invested in that company, or the company has just grown, big enough and they have a significant influence on the society as well, and they want a good rating. So this is one aspect. At the same time, let's say a company, it's a company is just growing, they're growing bigger, they are looking to seek investors to invest in them. So these kinds of companies will actually approach the rating agency to also get rated, so that once they get rated, they can also market the rating to the investors to let them know that, look, we are in a way doing good from a sustainability standpoint. So you can safely invest your capital with us. This can be both for raising money in the form of equity or raising the money in the form of debt. So let's say going to a bank as well and asking for loans. So then companies would also want to get themselves rated and then approach so that they can get loan at a lower interest rate, for example. So yeah, there are two ways to it.
Thank you so much.
Can I just
Awesome.
ask quickly, are any of these ratings actually measuring positive impact in terms of external impact, as opposed to rating companies purely on the ESG risk aspects of their own business?
Great question again. So that is the next evolution in ESG ratings, is in my take. Sustainalytics, I remember before leaving, they were also discussing this aspect of bringing in the element of impact, wherein not just assessing what kind of risks the company faces from the society and environment, but what kind of impact the company is going to have on the society and environment. And this is sort of where I also see the rating evolving. Because for now, the main issue has been that investors are only concerned about risks. So companies are the rating firms have only focused purely on risks. And prior to this, it was only based on disclosures. Like companies would just disclose everything and then they would get a good rating. But that had sort of evolved now to a risk approach. And now I see this evolving into a more impact approach, wherein we would then be evaluating a company's impact on the society, environment, and the people. So this is the next evolution or step, if I may say, in ESG ratings. It's not yet there. It's not yet reached yet. We haven't reached that stage yet.
So nobody's doing it?
Yeah, mostly no, from my opinion.
Okay, thanks.
Does Arun hear? May I?
Yeah, sure, please.
Great. That was a great question, Reed. Thanks for the clarification, Vishwesh. Here's the question I have in place. Who is the beneficiary of this ratings other than investors?
Companies as well, because it's reached a stage where companies are wanting to have a good ESG performance rating, so that as I earlier mentioned, they can use that as a marketing tool for them to raise more capital, whether it be in the form of equity or in the form of debt.
Eventually. So that answers my first question. And second, when you said that, the follow-up question is, I see this ratings or probably ESG is all one form of instrument for, capital, and this is the only thing is the ESG. I mean, I'm just taking a step back and looking at all these things. It is used as a financial instrument, because I see that SASB, TCFD, GRI, all these policies of framework actually being positioned to support the financial instrument called ESG, which is again the primary focus is to raise funds, and the byproduct is causing an equilibrium in environment and this gender equity and all this stuff. Am I partly right, or?
Yeah, no, definitely you're right. That is definitely one aspect. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, overall, it moves with the market. What the market wants. So initially, the market wanted disclosures, and then disclosures became available. But then it reached a point where there was a lot of noise, unnecessary disclosures, companies disclosing random stuff. Greenwashing came into effect, and then it sort of transitioned to risks, wherein you have now countries feeling the impacts of climate change, both physically as well, and from a transition standpoint. And then you see the investor community coming in to understanding how they can protect their capital and yet generate returns. So then the rating sort of evolved from this to that. And then the next stage is what I earlier mentioned, where it would go into impact, the impact side of things. But yeah, I mean, for now, I would say this is where it is. It's sort of being integrated into financial instruments because ultimately that's the end goal. And the biggest challenge with ESG is that a lot of it is qualitative and subjective, and it's inherent to it, because you have metrics that can't be quantified. But how do you quantify them into a financial metric? How can you quantify a non-financial metric into something that can financially impact the company? That's the biggest challenge because it's in a way non-quantifiable. So that's the biggest challenge the industry is facing, and it will continue to face. But at least it is being recognized now that these can have financial implications on a company. So the ultimate goal, as you also mentioned, is to integrate it into financial instruments and becoming just another, let's say, parameter that financial analysts use to rate or to just understand the performance of a company.
Sure. Thanks for the honest answer and clarifying. Yeah, please go ahead. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Great. So before we're going on into understanding the rating aspects, there's one thing that I wanted to just highlight, showing that different companies in different industries approach sustainability differently. This is primarily because the way they work. For example, an oil and gas company will be focusing on certain issues versus a tech company like Facebook or Google. They'll be focusing on a different set of ESG issues. So while an ESG rating is performed, we should also be cognizant of the fact that companies approach ESG in a different way based on the way they operate, the way they function.
I'm not sure I would agree with you there, if you don't mind.
Sure, please go ahead. Happy to.
Well, I just have a view, and maybe I'm a sample of one only. But we had a lesson earlier on, materiality assessment. And, obviously, if you're in the oil and gas business or energy, then definitely environmental would be a very huge part of what you need to contribute in terms of, transparency and scoring. But, I read a bank's ESG report. It's 150 pages, right? 146 is climate. But actually climate, if you're doing materiality assessment for a bank, is not the issue. It should be social. It's where their money's going. Where are they lending the money? What impact are they having? And for me, banks report like an energy company. I don't understand it.
Yeah, very good point. Thanks for raising it. In my opinion, I would probably say it depends on what the bank wants to focus on. So let's say banks might be getting pressure from their investors, or the banks might be lending to companies that are having a more climate oriented impact, or the banks just want that particular bank just wanted to develop a climate strategy wherein they are guaranteeing that they're only funding companies that have reduced their carbon emissions or have some sort of climate change strategy in place. This is the only explanation that I can think of.
Yeah, I just think
but yeah, you're right.
I think a lot of them are not
ultimately
properly doing their materiality assessment. Or secondly, environmental data is much easier to collect than social data, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a factor as well that comes into place when we discuss.
Could it be
overall,
that sorry, just saying, could it be that the loans that they're lending, most of the development projects, they just want to focus that we are giving loans towards more green projects, not brownfield projects, or to what development they are giving loans to. If the bank wants to show that, probably then they would focus on environmental. also.
Yes, exactly. That can also be a factor.
Yeah, I have one point. I mean, Red, we can do one thing that if you want to check the legitimacy of the bank which you are referring to, you can go on the MSCI or Sustainalytics. You can put the company this data and you can put the name of the company and you can see what are the ratings this Sustainalytics and MSCI given to them or DJSI or CDP, and then you can be sure that exactly the material which they have provided in the 150 pages report is like valid or not, because right, Viswesh, because there we get the idea what is right, what is wrong, right, in the rating system.
I mean, again, it depends. Like, it depends on what the bank wants. So if you're going to rate the bank itself, it's a different aspect versus what the bank feels it's important for its strategy and growth. So it's I would say a combination. Of course, you can check the rating, and
Yeah.
it will have its own ratings. But at
Okay.
the same time, yeah, you can go and sort of understand what the bank wants to do. But one point that was raised was like it's tough to get disclosures on certain social aspects. It ultimately comes down to what information they get from the companies they invest in. Cool.
Hi, Vishwas. I just had a question. So what I'm hearing in a lot of these talks is that the investor perspective is quite important when it comes to disclosing ESG information. And right now, we're seeing that we are sort of moving towards how the company points. So where do you think a multi-stakeholder perspective stands at this point, since it's quite investor heavy at the moment?
Yes, and I would say at least for ESG ratings, at this point, it's still the investors community, and then you have the corporates. So it's still these two are the stakeholders that ESG ratings primarily cater to, and they don't focus on any other stakeholder. For now, it's the big investor community, and then you have the companies itself who directly approach the rating firms for them to get rated. So it's just these two stakeholders that the ESG rating firms cater to.
All right. Okay.
Okay. In sort of that's a good transition to move on to the research process that happens in a typical rating company, at least the big ones. The step-by-step process that goes into a rating company. So the first element you have is the company data, a company's annual reports, their sustainability reports, everything that the company discloses. So that is the first aspect. The second aspect would be the alternative data, which includes reports from NGOs, from vetted or reputed journals, newspapers, magazines, also data on a company's controversies, negative aspects of a company, what kind of events or incidents that the company is involved in. So these are all the data aspects. So this gets collected and then flows into the analysis part. The analysis part is where you have a particular ESG rating's own individual methodology or their intellectual property, where they have come up with a methodology that they apply on these data points and assign relevant weights for each particular issue, and then the analysis is done. Once the analysis is done, it then flows into the quality and peer review process, wherein you have a more experienced analyst or a sector expert who will be going through and reviewing whether the analysis is, let's say, meets the standards that the rating firm or agency has set. And then that would, once this is complete, the rating agency or firm, at least the most prominent rating agency or firms, would then send this draft report of the analysis of that company to the company itself for feedback. This is predominantly done, one, to ensure transparency of the rating, and two, to make sure that the rating is appropriate and does not contain any false analysis or false information. So then the company would either respond to the rating. In some cases, they just do not. In some cases, they do. And if they do, then that is also taken into account. And then the rating gets finally published into the portal or sent to the investor client who has subscribed to that rating. In most rating firms, this is how the ESG research process flows. And to sort of highlight where the job opportunities lie for ESG analysts within the ESG ratings space is in the analysis part, in the quality review, and in the company feedback section. So most rating firms do recruit for folks within these three buckets, because the other two are more self-explanatory and they are collected. Rather, like, this is where you need the expertise or folks to do the analysis, do the quality and peer review, and then try engaging with the company to make sure that the feedback process is smooth. I will again pause here for any questions.
One more. Sorry, Vispesh. I really want to know this company feedback. So, who asked the company to give a feedback? Rating companies, and how they ask them? Like, if it is a Tata company and they are, navigating, collecting the data, altering the data, making it clean, and then doing analysis, then who asks for a company feedback, and what kind of a feedback they ask
Thanks
to the
for the
company?
question.
Yeah.
So who asks the feedback? It's the rating agency, the rating firm, either MSCI, Sustainalytics, or ISS. They reach out to the company. And what do they reach out for? They basically send them the draft rating report that the rating firm has come up with. They'll just send them the draft report, and then they will ask either, let's say, Tata, look, we have rated you, and this is our rating. And then based on these parameters, can you please have a look and get back to us? They usually give a month or so, or depending on the rating firm, a time, and then they would wait for the company to respond. So to just basically ensure that the rating is consistent, or if there are any aspects that they disagree. This primarily relates to the disclosures the company has made, or it can be any controversy that the company is involved in. Let's say, for example, Tata is involved in a protest or a strike in one of their plants, and that's an issue that we have flagged. But then let's say the news agency or media has not followed up with that to the fullest, which means that, let's say, that has been resolved already, but then we didn't know. Then the company would come back to us telling us that, look, it has been resolved, and give us a confirmation that this has been resolved, some sort of a proof, and then we would incorporate that into the rating. So yeah, this is
Okay.
basically how the feedback process works.
Yeah, it's time taking then. Okay, no problem. Yeah, Kirti,
Yes.
you ask your doubt now.
Can you, sir, please explain one more time what is quality and peer review?
Sure, absolutely. So the rating work will be done by an ESG analyst, a rating analyst. And once that's done, the rating firm usually will not directly send it to the company for feedback. They would then pass it on to a more experienced or senior analyst within the rating firm to have a look at the analysis, to make sure that it's consistent, to make sure in case the analyst has missed something that could be incorporated, or the analyst has rated in a different way that doesn't agree with the company's rating methodology. So you would have this quality and peer review process to just basically another pair of extra experienced eyes to look at things and make sure things are consistent.
Sir, so I have a query. So who is rating? The analyst is doing the rating here.
Yes, you have ESG analysts who will be rating the company. Right?
And then it is
So
going
then,
for the quality and the peer review.
yes, exactly.
And on what basis is, initially the company is getting all the data, what is important, all the material aspects is shortlisted. And what is the basis by which this analyst is analyzing?
Yes, so I
How
will
is he
discuss
bringing
that.
up how is bringing up the rating score?
Yeah, so that I will discuss in the following section. So sort of building it up to that part.
Okay,
Sort of
thank you.
explaining step by step how it works. Yes. Great. Awesome. So yeah, it's literally the next part and a good segue to the next part. Again, I'm sort of just posing this question to the audience, sort of, if you were to rate the ESG performance of company, how would you do it? What would you do?
Collect data first from all the sources that are available.
I think we would first look at their sustainability report.
Can I answer?
Yeah, please. Yeah,
I'm pumped up.
please.
Okay, so first we are going to the if the case is Adani Gas, then I'm gonna go on Adani Gas website. I'm gonna look for the um, sustainability report, Adani Gas 2020 to 21. I'm going to open that again. Then I'm going to look for the materiality assessment and I'll read few pages, starting pages, so that I can get the understanding what they are doing, what are the ambitions they have, put like 2000 till to 2050, we will reach the water neutrality goal, or waste neutral or zero waste company, like that. And then I'll look for more details in the report. And again, I'll do the check, like the checklist which is provided to me through the company, that these are the reports, these are the keywords which I need to search in the report. And then I'll write down whatever the social and governance parameter they have taken a consideration of. Apart from that, I don't know right now.
So then what would be the case if there is no sustainability report existing for a new company, maybe a younger one who is starting their ESG journey for the first time? If you don't have a previous sustainability report, how do you assess just based off the annual report which is published, or you need something more data to start the process of ESG rating?
Thank you for the questions and the answers. I mean, all the answers are predominantly correct. That's essentially how most of the rating firms start with the analysis. And to your question, I would say if the company does not have a sustainability report, but it's a listed company, then definitely they will have their annual report, and that would be the starting point to start with the analysis. In the annual report, you have a section called risk factors. And that section usually highlights what sort of legal consequences or complications the company is involved in right now or is facing. So those becomes an element of the analysis. And further, they would basically go out to see what else the company has disclosed on its website. Let's say if it doesn't have a sustainability report. And if there is nothing out there, then from a disclosure standpoint, there will be no rating because there's no disclosures. However, there will still be analysis on the company's risks. For example, through third-party outlets, we would still analyze if the company has been involved in any negative controversy or event related to ESG, and then that will flow into the rating. So yeah, this is how I would say a rating is given for a company with limited information or with no sustainability report per se.
Can I just stop? Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Reid, may I?
Go ahead.
Thanks. Vishwesh, my question is, like, when you talk about a scorecard, right? Like when you talk about how do you put a rating? You have certain scorecard associated to certain KPIs, and this is very specific to rating agencies, right? The scorecard, the weightage may vary from Fitch to somebody else, right? Morningstar or someone, right? So who decides the scorecard here? And is there any consortium who actually gives the framework for the rating agencies to decide the scorecard? Based on the scorecard, you get a rating. Am I understanding correct?
Yes, your understanding is absolutely correct. And I will be explaining that in this section, basically.
Perfect. Thanks, Reid. Over to you.
Yeah, so it was just a quick one. When you talk about rating, is it an absolute rating, or is it a rating that's relative to the company's peer group?
So it can be taken from both perspectives. In most cases, I would say from a practical or logical standpoint, it has to be compared relative to the company's peer group. So let's say here I've shown Amazon, and it's within the retailing group, or Tesla within the automobiles group. So it should technically be compared within the group, because if you just compare it in a broader perspective, it might be controversial, or it will not give you a clearer picture. Although it can be compared because the scores are absolute, so they can still be compared to a company in another industry, but you will still not get a more clearer picture. So the best approach would be to look at it within the industry group and compare it within the industry group.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Vishwi,
So, yep.
In the case, you said that all the different rating companies focus on different things and give weightage to various things, and it's all different. So how does the company decide which rating company to use, and what is their basis to decide that?
Yeah, so the companies will follow, as I pointed out earlier in the slides, some of the established frameworks, like GRI or TCFD, just market recognized, globally accepted frameworks. They would go into GRI, see, so GRI has sort of core and comprehensive standards of disclosures that companies can follow, and that includes a set of ESG metrics. And once the company's report is prepared, they will then mention what kind of standards they had followed in their report preparation and disclosing the data. But again, it doesn't mean that the company has to follow the standards. Sometimes company will just take inspiration from these standards and will follow their own ways of disclosing sustainability information. And that one I can't explain because I'm not part of the company. But overall, in the companies that I've analyzed and rated, most of the companies are usually the big ones, and they usually follow the GRI standard for disclosing data, along with the upcoming TCFD standards as well. Awesome. So now I'm sort of moving on to the part where how do these rating agencies identify what issues are important or material, and how do they start assigning scores or weights? And this section is going to explain that. So I'm just going to share a video that I would like to play before explaining. So let me play them.
Hello.
Are you all able to hear the video as well while I'm playing?
Yes.
Yes.
In
Okay.
this video,
Awesome.
we will take a closer look at material ESG issues. ESG issues are considered material if they can significantly impact a company's enterprise value and are relevant to the sub-industry in which the company operates. A material ESG issue can bring together several related topics based on the type of management initiatives and oversight that is required. For example, human capital brings together topics such as employee recruitment, development, diversity, and engagement, because they require HR initiatives and oversight. However, even though it also concerns employees, occupational health and safety is classified as a separate ESG issue because it requires different types of initiatives and oversight. Where relevant, we also make a distinction between different stages of the value chain when defining ESG issues. For example, do the carbon emissions relate to the company's products and services or its operations? The reason for distinguishing between material ESG issues in this way is to enable us to more accurately assess the relevant management indicators. This assessment can also be influenced by incidents as they indicate the company's management activities were insufficient or ineffective. For example, a company's health and safety system cannot be said to function well if it has experienced an incident that resulted in several fatalities. In total, Sustainalytics differentiates between 20 material ESG issues, of which up to 10 can apply to any one company. Now let's look at idiosyncratic ESG issues. There may be instances where an issue that is deemed immaterial may become material due to an unexpected and unforeseeable incident. a so-called black swan event. In this case, the issue is included as a material ESG issue for that company, and it will affect its overall risk rating. We refer to these issues as idiosyncratic issues, and they are another way in which we make the ESG risk rating more company specific. Thank you for watching.
Thank you. So sort of, this is just Sustainalytics ways of how it classifies or identifies material ESG issues. But sort of taking a step back, how are these issues identified? What goes on as the starting point, that you mentioned? How are the weights allocated? How are the different, issues classified? So that starts with the industry specific aspect of the company that it belongs in. So let's say Tesla, for example, within the automobile sector, you have the SASB classifying of what's called the SASB materiality map, and it has mapped out different industries and sectors to different ESG issues that are more relevant to particular sectors. And then you also have the GRI sector standards, wherein GRI themselves have come up with different sector-based ESG metrics that companies operating in those sectors should disclose. So eventually the starting point is the industry that the company belongs to. And this flows on to then the regional specificity. So this means the country of operations and the regulatory environment. Some of the examples include the Corruption Perception Index. So this is basically based on the country that the company has operations in. The country is rated based on its levels of corruption. And then you have the Climate Change Performance Index, which is basically a country's preparedness to climate change and what kind of physical and transition risks that the country can face from climate change. And then you have Business and Human Rights Research Center, which basically classifies companies as well and countries on their human rights programs, initiatives, and whether there have been any breaches of human rights issues in the company or the country. So these, and then lastly, you have the company specific risks that the rating firm individually uses with the help of its own experts to identify what issue is, let's say, material to a particular company within a particular industry. But if you see overall, this is how it starts with. So you have first the industry, and then the region that it operates, and then it flows down into the company specific risks. And all the numbers, the weights, how much of a weight should we give to, let's say, human capital? How much of a weight should we give to, let's say, carbon own emissions, is all based on these aspects. And then the weighting is given. But the weighting in itself is the key selling point of the rating firm. For example, MSCI will have a different ratings or a weighting methodology versus Sustainalytics, versus ISS, versus RobecoCom, versus Vigeo Eiris. So this is the unique selling points of rating firms. Like, it's how they use their scoring and weighting methodology to eventually score a company. But most of these firms, as a starting point, this is how they would start with in identifying what issues are material to a particular company within a particular industry.
Hi, I just want to know, because there are so many rating systems, do companies prefer one rating company over the other because of the way they rate, like the efficiency or the thoroughness or the straightforwardness that a particular company rates?
Yes, so there are again two aspects to it. You had asked on the companies. So companies initially don't have a lot of say in it because the ratings are eventually going to the investors. But as the rating firm gets prominent, if more investors are coming to the company and engaging with them on a particular rating given by a particular rating firm, then the company realizes the importance of that rating firm and then approaches that rating firm to get rated. But in essence, as most of these rating firms initially, they only focus on the biggest 13 to 15,000 companies. So most of these companies know that they're being rated by these different firms in some way or the other. It's just that what ratings matter to them more, because what kind of investors use the ratings and they come and engage with the company. So this is how it flows. Hope that helps.
Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, let me go to the next slide. Yeah, so we in the previous slide we discussed how it starts, the exposure, how the risks are assessed based on the different parameters. And once that gets assessed, the next stage will be how are these risks being managed by the company. And within the management element, we have two kinds of overarching metrics. You have the qualitative ESG metrics and the quantitative ESG metrics. The quantitative ESG metrics, as you know, are a lot more easier to measure because they're just numbers that can be reported by the company, or numbers can be found. Whereas you have the qualitative ESG metrics, which are a little more difficult to exactly quantify from a financial sense. But however, it can still have financial implications on the company, because we need to see what kind of issues that the company is exposed to and how they are managing those issues. And here I've just highlighted very few examples of what you exactly mean by qualitative metrics versus quantitative metrics. And again, in terms of assigning scores and weights, this is the unique selling point of the rating firm. They will have their own internal scoring system wherein they give certain higher percentage of weights to certain metrics based on the company and the industry versus certain metrics, again, based on the company and industry. So this is where the scoring and weighting element changes significantly from a rating firm to a rating firm. But overall, at a higher level, if you look,
Hello.
most of the rating firms will still be using this level of analysis to start with their rating. Like they would still follow SASB or GRI, and they would still highlight, let's say, Chevron or ExxonMobil. They still would highlight that these companies face significant risks from their own carbon own operations, because that is how it is. That is a material issue for that company. It's just that then when you go into the weightings analysis, how the rating can change sometimes and cannot change as well, that then depends on the company or the rating firm that is rating it.
Oh, okay, thanks.
So I can pause here for some questions.
They don't actually, I mean, the rating agencies don't generally perform the risk assessment, or they don't perform the risk assessment which has already been submitted by the company. Am I right?
No, so the rating firms will have its own what is considered as a risk for the company. So they would have their own methodology, and they would identify, based on this slide here, they would identify what risks that they would want to rate the company on, and then just ask the company for feedback
Okay.
after rating.
Okay. Right. The reason why I asked is like we had the earlier day session on materiality, so each and every company has to come up with their own critical economic function, or which is primarily focus on certain parameters, right? So that is subjected to a particular company, and they publish the risk assessment based on the identified factors from the company standpoint. But from the rating standpoint, they have a specific set of parameters, and they ask the feedback from the company, correct?
Exactly, that's absolutely correct. And that also at times can create confusion or traction, between companies and rating firms, because the company would have identified, look, this is more material, so this is more important to us, whereas the rating agency would have then come up with a different sort of a risk assessment, and then these are issues that are more relevant to us. But again, that discrepancy will exist, because at the end of the day, all these are just ratings, and it's people's opinions on what is more important versus what is not important. And it again ties down to that element of subjectivity. But this is how the process is done.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Then I've just highlighted or selected one company to further understand again how the rating process is carried out. And I mean, as you all know, Tesla, one of the world's largest EV manufacturers, headquartered in the United States. And as a key ESG issue, this is what I have identified for Tesla. Of course, there can be other ESG issues as well. But let's say if I was a rating firm and I have identified these three as the predominant ESG issues for Tesla, my next step would be to explaining it to clients why I've identified these three ESG issues for Tesla as more important or critical compared to some of the other ESG issues that Teslas could face. So the first one is being product quality and safety. This is something that I see the company being exposed to in a significant way, predominantly because they manufacture electric cars, and it can be prone to defects, design flaws that can lead to malfunctioning of the cars and then eventually resulting in product recalls, and that can affect the company's sales and revenue estimate. So this is a critical ESG issue, and we also have been seeing incidents all over the world of certain Tesla cars not functioning up to the maximum potential. The second aspect that I would identify is the carbon footprint, the product carbon footprint, because this one is not associated with the company in particular. This is with the industry itself. The industry, automobiles industry, if you look at it, predominant emissions come not from manufacturing, but the use phase emissions, which is emissions. So that is a key ESG issue that I would look at to assess this company. In Tesla's case, I'm hoping or I'm assuming that they would be doing better than the rest because they're electric cars, and this is their strong point. But nevertheless, when you assess ESG risks, you will have to look at it sort of holistically from the industry standpoint. What are the risks that a company in the automobile sector will face? The third and other important risks that I have identified is human capital. This is again a key component because the company has manufacturing operations and plants across the globe, and dealing with people and human capital becomes critical for the company because on one end, they will need to recruit skilled folks to further improve the product, and at the same time, they need to make sure that the company does not face any sort of labor relations strikes or protests in their factories or plants because of either overworking or not being paid well, not being paid optimum wages, or it can be any other human capital issue. But nevertheless, these are the ESG risks or issues that I've identified for this company within this sector that should be looked upon when, or investors would want to look at first before assessing other ESG issues. And
Sir, I have a
when
query.
yeah, sure.
Sir, the point which you have made here regarding the skilled labor and poor labor relations practices, can you pinpoint any statement or any paragraph which you can as to how you have identified that there is some poor practice in labor relations, whereas a company like Tesla, like a big companies, how will they tell you that there are some labor relations problem which we are having? What kind of a disclosure are we checking for where we are seeing that there is some labor relation problem in a company?
Thank you. Yeah, again, very good question. So there are two elements to it. To your first question, um, I'm not associating this with the company. I'm associating this with the industry itself. For the automobile sector itself, human capital is a critical component. It's a critical ESG issue that needs to be managed. So that is one of the reasons I've considered human capital as a key ESG risk. And this is based on what, even if you look at the SASB standards or the GRI standards, they will also have mentioned human capital as a critical issue for the automobile sector. And to your second question, how do you find this? So this is where, when I discuss in the research process, you have the alternative data or the alternative data that flows in. So these are basically news aggregators, news providers, reputed media journals, articles, Tesla might not disclose this incident because it is a bad or negative incident that can impact Tesla, but you will find this in reputed news journals or articles, or just in the local media, wherein if there's an incident in a factory, like an accident or some sort of a harassment lawsuit, then it will be captured by news providers, and then it will be made available to these rating firms, and then that will get rated. So this is why the alternative data element plays a critical role while assessing the overall ESG performance of a company, because from a company standpoint, they will predominantly only disclose things that are positive or that are good. I mean, in their Form 10K, if the company is legally involved in any issue, then they will have to disclose they're facing legal liabilities worth so many dollars or so. But these sort of incidents, sometimes, you won't find it in a company's sustainability report or in a report. And this is why the alternative data comes into place, and that will help you, find information on this. I mean, even now, if you probably Google Tesla labor disputes or protester strikes, you might come across articles on the web that the company is sort of involved in these issues, and then you would integrate that into this analysis.
Yeah, just to add to Vishwesh, I think one of the point was, you're talking about a Modern Slavery Act, the 2015 UK law. You're talking about a suppliers as well, right? Like a company like Tesla will not obviously disclose, but then their mining sites will have to comply. I mean, the supplier have to comply with the Modern Slavery Act. And now, when we do the due diligence, I don't think we will not be able to disclose that. And eventually that's in the news, and we're talking about adverse media and all this stuff, right? So that's exactly where, just to supplement your point on this.
Yeah, absolutely, on point. That is exactly how it works.
I have one question, Vishesh. Sorry. So there has been cases where Tesla has failed to deliver to their commitment. Suppose they have gotten a huge amount of bookings, but the delivery of the vehicles are delayed by a long shot. So does that affect the ESG rating in some cases, like in any way?
So you have to sort of little bit go deeper and see what was the ultimate issue behind that. If it's, let's say, a product quality issue, if it's a product safety issue, if it's a design flaw that the customer has used and then has been impacted in any way, then that is definitely an ESG issue. It would fall under product quality and safety. Or let's say if the company has already sold a product and then voluntarily said that, look, we have, but then we want to take it back, then that would still be an ESG issue.
Okay, but I think it was because they didn't, refine their production process, so they overestimated their production capacity and took a lot of bookings, but then they failed to deliver. Some customers had to wait for like 1.5 years to get their.
Yeah, I guess that. Yes.
Yeah.
So that would also fall under this. It would be product and service quality. That would be the service quality. That's a service. Yes. Agree. Exactly. Of course. And so sort of having identified these issues.
Hello, sir. I have one question.
Yeah, sure.
Sir, the production of electricity depends on coal mining and the poor labor quality out there who works in the coal mines. So does it also relate with the Tesla, because Tesla is the electrical vehicles depend on the electricity. So does it have any relation with this, with the Tesla?
So you have to, there are multiple elements you can look at it from. So as you said, production. So how are Tesla's car assembling or production factories powered? That is one aspect you look at it. Then that would be in their own operations. You would look at whether the energy that the factories are using to produce these cars, the electricity, is it coming from a renewable source or not? So that is one aspect. The other aspect is more supply chain related, as you mentioned. The batteries that are being manufactured, the elements that go into the battery, they can come from a third tier or fourth tier supplier. And where do these suppliers get their energy from while manufacturing these elements? And then, if it's from a non-renewable source like coal, then yes, this would contribute into a company's third tier emissions or scope 3 emissions. So ultimately, it also depends on which aspect you look at it when it comes to energy source. Hope that helps.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Sort of moving on to the management aspects. Having identified these three issues, how would a company go about managing these three ESG issues? What are the management metrics or parameters that they would want the company to disclose or provide so that the investor can get confidence that, look, okay, the company has been managing these issues well. So here I've highlighted some of these issues that are important or critical for a company to be disclosing or having established in their place, starting with a product quality or safety policy. So the term policy itself implies that it has to be a formal document that has been approved and signed either by the CEO or the C-suite, because it is a binding document that the company has to follow. And if they do go against these policies, then there are chances the company can be taken to court and sued against it. So that is why it is important to have a robust, a formal, established quality policy. The second aspect is that the management oversight for product quality and safety, whether the company has a dedicated team focused towards product quality and safety. And this team, either should have a senior representative from the board or the executive committee to oversee this product quality and safety design. And then you would need a company to be providing its employees training on product quality and safety, because this is a critical element. If the employees are not aware of what quality or safety issues that can be encountered in the product, then that would translate to the product not being manufactured in a robust way. So of course, the training need to be given to employees as well. And then this element of regular quality and safety audits that needs to be performed. And lastly, an emergency response procedures that should be in place. This is the reason being, if let's say there has been an issue within the company, not within the company, within the product, and this, let's say, affects the entire car market, and this has resulted in tremendous amounts of cars being recalled, then the company should have a procedure in place to deal with this tremendous amounts of recalls. Because if they do not, then again, this can affect the company's overall operations and then reducing its overall customer and service quality. Last but not the least, certification to recognized quality management standards. The most prominent ones being the ISO 9001 and also an industry-specific IATF standard. So while looking for certifications, in most cases, ISO 901 certifications do exist because they assess how well a company's operations and facilities perform when it comes to product quality and safety. But at the same time, you also have industry-specific standards or certifications that are also applicable. So IATF is only for the auto sector. So as a rating firm, either of these would apply. Like, I just need to make sure that the company has a certification related to these standards. And one common thread that connects all these management indicators is they should be applicable company-wide. It will not make sense if it is only applicable to just one factory in one location. Then that will not be considered as a relevant policy, because it has to be applicable across the company, across regions, across factories. And that is also something that rating agencies look for while they perform the rating assessment. Lastly, which I've highlighted in red, is the negative aspect, which flows into the alternative data, product and quality safety incidents. So here we assess what kind of negative controversies or incidents that the company is involved in to sort of understand if, let's say, they do disclose all these policies in place and still they're involved in these incidents, then it goes on to show that the policies or programs are not being implemented in an effective manner. And this is something that the investors will look at, or it will be highlighted to the particular investor client that although the company has these procedures and policies in place, they are still not effectively using them or managing them, because you can see these quality and safety incidents consistently happening over and over again. So these are some of the, let's say, both qualitative and quantitative performance metrics that you would be using or a rating agency uses to assess a particular ESG risk or issue. And this is for product quality and safety. Similarly, when you go to human capital, some of the metrics that you would look at it again is a freedom of association policy. To further explain to those what freedom of association means is that whether the company has the right to form unions. That is considered a critical component because then it gives the employee or the worker a voice to act if the company is not treating them well. So this is a key element that goes into the assessment. And then you would look at talent recruitment, development, and retention initiatives. What kind of initiatives that the company has to not just recruit people, but also help them grow professionally in their career, and also at the same time help them retain. Because if you don't retain them, then the company is still losing skilled workforce to a competitor or someone else. So that ties down to employee training. What kind of employee training programs the company has, whether it's applicable company-wide, how frequently do employees get trained on topics that they're interested in, and so on and so forth. Other element that goes into the assessment is employee feedback mechanisms, whether the company regularly conducts feedback surveys with employees on how they can improve any concerns that employees might have. So whether the company discloses any feedback mechanisms. Diversity is a critical issue in the investors' agenda right now. The policy, does it have employee resource groups in place? When you mean by employee resource groups, it means for particular, a resource group for women, a resource group for disabled people. So just specific groups within the company to help them grow in their career professionally. These are some of the elements that you would look at. Another element is turnover data. This is a key factor that investors use in assessing a company's human capital element, because if the company continues to have a high turnover year over year, then there is something either wrong or some risk that the company faces, because employees are leaving, and that can affect the company's performance in the long term. And lastly, again, from an alternate negative incidents that the company has been involved, quantitative and qualitative metrics for human capital that I would, or a rating agency would look at when it comes to assessing ESG performance. The third key issue, which was identified, was product carbon footprint. In this case, we would want to look at how well the company manages its use phase emissions, which is basically once a product is sold into the market, scope 3 emissions or indirect emissions, how does it affect the company? And in this case, Tesla is bound to do well because they have electric vehicles and they basically have 0 emissions. The only reason they can have emissions is either through their manufacturing facilities or the indirect emissions that go into manufacturing the car or the electric batteries, as I had mentioned earlier. How does the battery gets manufactured? So there can be some emissions in that front, but from the use phase, from the car itself, there will technically be no emissions. And then you would also look at product stewardship, the entire life cycle or end of life reuse of the car or product from the stage it gets manufactured to the stage it gets fully used and then discarded, and what happens to the discarded product. So these are the aspects that you would look at when assessing the product carbon footprint metric. Similarly, for every other ESG issue, you have a certain set of qualitative and quantitative ESG parameters or metrics that rating firms use to eventually assess the company's performance. And then they would allocate different weights based on what they perceive as more important versus less important. And if you can see here, both Sustainalytics and MSCI do have ratings, a high-level overview of the ratings publicly available for anyone. You can just go and check it out. And for Tesla, if you see in particular, Sustainalytics has given them, from a risk standpoint, a medium risk rating, and MSCI has given them a rating of A, which is considered average. So although the way they've rated and reached the result is different, the overall rating still speaks the same message. They've given an average rating and then a medium risk, which means that there are certain things that the company is probably doing well, and at the same time there are certain things that the company can work on to improve when it comes to their overall ESG performance. I'll again take a pause here for any questions. Cool. Thanks then. So
Sir, I have a question.
yeah, sure. Sorry. Go ahead.
So as you told that different rating agencies rate the same company differently. So how investors like identify which rating is best for the company?
Yes, again, very good question, very valid question. So again, as I mentioned, rating is subjective. Just like how, as an investor, as let's say you would want to particularly invest in just a company that focuses on good human capital initiatives, then you would focus on that particular aspect and you would not particularly focus on other aspects of ESG. So it depends on the investor values. Investors will select, okay, this is the kind of rating that I need, this is the kind of disclosure that I need from the company, and this is what I also need from the rating firm, and they would then just focus on those disclosures. Some of the larger rating firms, as I had in the beginning of the presentation discussed, that they just take ratings from different rating agencies and then they have their own internal rating to sort of combine and then create a rating that they feel is more accurate or more relevant to the companies that they have invested in. So it again depends from investor to investor. What they feel they would want, they would take it. And every rating firm has a unique proposition. For example, MSCI is the biggest and the most popular one. And they have their ratings embedded intrinsically in different ETFs and mutual funds and indexes. Sustainalytics has also its ratings embedded in indexes, but at the same time, Sustainalytics is sort of very strong when it comes to controversy assessments. That is Sustainalytics' selling point, assessing or identifying controversies that companies are involved in. So an investor will just take that particular aspect from Sustainalytics, and then he would probably take MSCI's climate change rating alone, and then build into their own internal rating, and then use it for their purpose. So it ultimately depends on the investor who is using the rating and what kind of ratings they prefer.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hello, sir. This lower the risk means it is good for company. ESG risk rating in Tesla and C for Sustainalytics it is 28.6. So if it is less than 10, then it's a good company. Can I repeat this?
Yeah, so it's just an identifier or an indicator of risk. So it shows that it's 28.6, and if you see below, they have the ranges. 0 to 10 means negligible risk, 10 to 20 is low risk, 20 to 30 is considered medium risk. So there is some risk that the company is facing, and they've highlighted it here. So it's up to you to consider it good or bad. If you see within the industry ranking, they rank pretty average, 45 out of 85 automobile companies that are being rated. So as an investor, this gives you a signal that, okay, there are things that the company is doing well. At the same time, there are some elements that the company could focus on to better manage their risk. So it's again tough to objectively say that it's good or bad. All have to be put into context, and then you have to assess whether you feel this is good or there are things you can improve. But here, in this case, it is considered medium risk, which means there is some elements that the company can work on to improve. And as part of your case studies, that is exactly what I would like you all as in groups to do, is basically to go and assess whether Tesla has disclosed their performance on these 3 ESG metrics pertaining to all these parameters, whether in their sustainability report or outside in the web, anything that you can find to basically assess Tesla's ESG risk and how well they perform on these parameters, and then give your own rating on what you think Tesla deserves. So that is one part of your case study or exercise, if I may say. And more details will follow on that as well. And Pratiksha will show you the case studies as well.
Sure. Vishwesh, one question. Speaking from understand from a global perspective, speaking of India specific, could you just throw some light on who were the most sought ratings from the company and also from the investors, and what kind of ETFs or bonds or green bonds at the moment is available? Because I know that India is still catching up, so I just want your view on these 2 questions.
Sure. From what I know, I was aware of, there are only a handful of funds that have ESG embedded into them. I think SBI's equity ESG fund, and then there is Kotak. They also have an ESG fund, an ESG mutual fund. Is it better now?
Yeah, I heard Kotak, but what is the first one you said again?
Was SBI. So SBI, they have a Magnum Equity ESG fund, it's called. So that's an ESG fund that is based on a few ESG ratings. And I'm sure now there are a lot more funds that are coming up.
So yeah, yes to come. But and which rating agencies predominantly these guys use?
That I don't know exactly. You can look at the fund's prospectus. I think SBI uses Sustainalytics. I'm not sure what Kotak uses. You can go, I think, definitely check in the fund's prospectus. They would have mentioned what kind of they use, how they collect the ratings, etc. and etc.
Right. My narrative was to understand which corporate India majorly uses the ratings company. Which of the rating companies have been used by corporate India is what I was trying to understand.
Yeah. I would say all the Sensex and Nifty companies definitely have ESG ratings that are rated by MSCI, Sustainalytics, ISS. But in terms of use, it again it depends on the fund houses what they are using. There are, I think, 4 to 5 mutual funds or ETFs that focus on ESG in the Indian market. But yeah, I'm not fully aware of.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, so if Vishwesh, are we going to conclude?
Yes, that's pretty much it. Just wanted to have this last 2-minute discussion on what the future of ESG ratings and firms looks like. And this is my take based on a statement from the former governor of the Bank of England, wherein I believe that ESG ratings will evolve to a point where it just becomes another tool within the financial investment analysis spectrum, and it just becomes another aspect, and you don't call it ESG anymore. You just call it analysis of a company, wherein you also analyze its ESG aspects and its financial aspects. And that's where I see it eventually heading, with regulations also coming into place across the world. But yeah, happy to hear also your thoughts from the participant side, what you think, how this looks like.
Also, I have one question, but I can ask on the AMA session, but still, like the companies, like who, the MSCI sent company a request to, we are gonna rate you, or we are going to rate your company, or company goes to MSCI and tell them that please rate my company. Like, I don't know how this works.
Sure. So companies can go to MSCI or Sustainalytics and ask them to get rated. So this would be from a company standpoint. Whereas MSCI Sustainalytics won't go to the company to tell them that they rate them. They will rate them. And then they will go to the company to just give them a feedback of their, or get a feedback from the company of the report that they have rated.
Okay, got it. So it's vice versa. Like company can go to them, or they can tell the company.
Yes, that's correct.
But
I just sorry.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So from what we understand, that there are no regulatory bodies that actually regulate these rating agencies, isn't it? So are there any steps being taken to have control over how these rating agencies function?
Yes, again, very good question. This has been proposed in the European Union, wherein they want some sort of an oversight on how these ratings perform, how their methodologies, how transparent these rating agencies are when it comes to rating a company. And this sort of regulatory framework has been devised, and now it's in the consultation phase in the EU, and it's supposed to get rolled out in 2023.
Thank you so much.
And then that would be a little bit more transparency on ESG ratings, at least their methodologies. I mean, most of the ratings are quite transparent. If you can just go into Sustainalytics or MSCI, and they will have pages and pages of documents, what they do, how they do it. And most of my content here is sort of based on public level information, because I'm also legally bound not to share the scoring methodology, because that is their intellectual property. But you can still discuss how it's done and what the process goes behind a ratings firm. So yeah, eventually it will reach that stage once these regulations hit, but we'll see. We don't know yet.
Thank you so much.
I have one question. Do they use some kind of tool to rate all these things? Like, I have heard that MSCI has this thing, ESG manager, where they feed in all the data and the ratings come out to them for analysis.
So these are yes, good question. So these are the intellectual property. That's the unique selling point of the rating. They will have a dedicated methodology team that comes up with a rating score or rating methodology, and then they will develop a database or a portal that can go while you're rating a company. So that's the unique selling point. That depends on the rating firm. Every rating firm will have its own unique tool or platform
So
where
can
they
other
go and
companies use those tools to rate their ESG performance?
Other companies, meaning?
Meaning, suppose there's this friend of mine who is working at MNG Global Services. So they're using MSCI ESG Manager. So since they're not a part of MSCI, so I was asking, can other companies?
Yeah, so other companies can't go and influence the ratings or
Not
let's say rate
rating.
a company. They can only
I'm asking about the tool. Can they use that tool to rate a company on basis
no,
of
they can't rate they cannot rate a company at all. It's the company itself that will rate. The tool is basically a platform that MSCI gives access to the clients for them to get the rating reports. So you can go view the rating of the company in these tools.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
I guess
I had one question regarding the future of the rating model looks like. Where do you think B Corp stand in all of this? Because they're not rating, but they are, sort of certifying businesses that are creating a positive impact, and they do score companies based on their impact assessment. So where do you
Yes.
think that stands, considering all of this? Because I know that they do have a multi-stakeholder approach in terms of their
Yes.
extensive questionnaire.
Yeah, no, good question again. But Yeah, again, they, as you pointed out yourself, that their sort of stakeholder focus is completely different. They don't primarily focus on investors, they focus on the company itself again, and it's also a selling point for the company. The company can say we're B Corp certified, which means that they have been assessed on certain parameters and metrics, and that will give a rating, a good impression of the company. But most of these companies are really small scale companies or private companies or SMEs, or it can be big companies who only get one portion of their factory or operation certified to B Corp. It's tough for a company like Tesla to become B Corp certified because it's impossible. It takes tremendous amounts of effort and resources. So B Corp certification is, at least from my standpoint, more applicable to really small scale companies. Just your nearby restaurant certified. I mean, it will still have a major role to play in the future. As it grows, it can also become a critical component of a rating firm. Yeah.
What was the company again? B Corp? B Corp. I'm sorry.
B Corp.
B Corp, yeah. Because I know that Danone and Unilever is also headed in that direction. So maybe it focuses more on consumer goods, because I know a lot of consumer good companies are going in that direction. So companies that are taking on sustainability in they're taking it head on are sort of getting their subsidiaries B Corp certified. So I was just thinking what kind of role it plays now.
Yes, I mean, definitely plays a role. At least from a rating standpoint, I don't know. It's still not yet being considered actively by any of the rating firms. But yeah, we'll see where it goes. But it definitely will have a role to play, if not for this stakeholders, but for a different set of stakeholders.
Okay, can we wrap this now? Because we have another session with Visvesh again on a 27th Tuesday, September 2022. So yeah, we can, and I'm gonna share one more PPT where you can find a YouTube link to this rating companies so that you can understand them pretty well from their own side. So I'll share that with you in one day. Okay. Thank you so much, Visvesh. It was really amazing. Your insights are valuable for us. And thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks. I just have one question. Sorry.
Okay, super.
No, not for Vishesh, but I just want to know how long will all these recordings be available on Slack? Like, how long?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I know that half of you are already downloaded all the recordings. But yeah, it is available for you since like this December.
Good question.
Okay. Yeah.
Till when, please?
Till December. Don't worry.
Okay.
Even if you are, even if you want this recording, I'll send it to you on your Google Gmail. Don't worry, I'm not gonna delete anything. Everything is on a drive. It's for you, and I do care that you learn about ESG because the market is really opening for this kind of a thing, and you need to be really crucial about every details. So I'm gonna keep posting on Slack about job market, about everything what is required for certain positions. So don't worry, and if you need any help, I am here. So, and there are a few people who haven't still joined from the first session. I'm gonna help them in October, even they start from the October of all this learning, because this lecture are one by one, and I know few of them. The Prerna's case study is linked to the Shruti's lecture, so you can get idea from how to do a materiality assessment, what are the factors are, and even the Visvesh case study. If you don't understand, we'll talk on it on 27th. Okay. Thank you, Subha. Don't worry. All the recordings and PPTs are.
Thank you. You're a sweetheart. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank
guys,
you
let's
all.
wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.